God, I was doing a lot of different movies. I'd done American Gigolo before that, and Cat People, and Thief. So I had a few films under my belt, and Don Simpson was an ex-roommate of mine, and I lent him my sport jacket to go be interviewed for the job at Paramount, which he got, and became the head of production. And he said, "We got this script, we got to get it going. It's supposed to be released in April, and we need somebody to come in and work on this," and it was Flashdance.
In a world made of steel, made of stone.
The whole thing originated long before me and before Don. It was something that Dawn Steele bought from Peters and Goober, who had a company, I think it was called Casablanca, that were making films. And Linda Opes had developed it there. She was an executive there.
I was miserably unhappy at the beginning of my motion picture career, working for Casablanca, and I was trying to figure out what I was doing there. I didn't really know how to do my job. I was a refugee from the New York Times, and I got a call from a fellow named Tom Headley, who had worked during the heydays of Esquire magazine, and he had one idea that he wanted to talk to me about, which was about girls who danced in bars in Vancouver. He said what was different about these girls that he watched was that they didn't dance to strip. They danced to dance because they wanted to be dancers, and they had their own costumes, and they had their own dance routines, and their favorite musical numbers. And he called them flash dancers. And I was immediately blown away. I said, this is it. This is a movie idea. I saw a modern musical, and I saw a girls' empowerment piece. I saw a way you could do kind of a girls' Rocky. And that was the beginning of Flashdance. So Paramount decided it wanted to make Flashdance, and Dawn Steele became the executive of Flashdance. It became her first project. Simpson and Bruckheimer became partners. It became their first project. Eventually, I became associate producer on the project, and Flashdance went on its long route to getting made.
I'd made a movie called Foxes that nobody went to see, you know, with Jodie Foster and Sally Kellerman. And I guess the tough thing really is sort of getting your first movie off. I mean, that's the really tough thing. But having done that, nobody was really interested in me doing another one. So then Dawn Steele offered me this script of Flashdance, and I thought it was pretty simplistic, you know, and I didn't like the script, and it was very hard for me to turn anything down.
And I read the script, and I said, oh, it's interesting, but needs work. It was, I think, the Tom Headley draft that I read. And he said, no, we're going to get a new writer, we're going to bring somebody else in, we're going to get it going. I have these instructions, we need something in the theaters, we got to get this thing ready. So we hired Joe Esterhaus. Joe had been a friend of Don's for a long time, was a writer at Rolling Stone, really had a beat on what kids were up to and what they were doing. And Joe turned in a screenplay that was much closer to a more realistic movie that we wanted to make.
Anyway, 6 months later, she approached me again and said, come on, you're going to do this. They want to make this film. And I could see that they obviously wanted to make it. So in the end, I did it.
Adrian's a real gifted artist, and he's a very strong visual artist. He has a unique visual point of view. And you wanted somebody to do a movie about dancers who had a very strong visual sense. And Don had heard of Adrian, knew his work, so it wasn't difficult to convince Don. Don was there already. It's just he had to convince his bosses, Michael Eisner, that this was the right way to go. And Michael had an enormous amount of faith in Don's ability and his creative instincts.
Don was the most extraordinarily enthusiastic person, and he was somebody who could consume you, this guy. I mean, and it was all for the movie. I mean, it was just passionate about the script and what we're going to do with it. I remember once getting on the phone with Don Simpson, and we started talking, I remember, at about 10 o'clock in the evening from my house. And we talked and we talked and we talked, and then I saw the light coming up. And I looked at my watch and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, so I'd been on the phone with him for, what, 9 hours, solid, and it didn't feel like it. That's what's so extraordinary.
You had to deliver. And, you know, Don, again, would push the studio for more money, would push the talent to get better. He was constantly pushing and never accepting anything as good enough.
So if the movie works in any way, it was because of an enormous amount of enthusiasm.
There weren't that many really known actors of that age that were 18, 19, 20 years old in those days. And it's real interesting how she got the job. Our casting director at the time, who was working in New York, and when we came into New York, when we saw a lot of women there, and this one girl who she'd worked with called her up and said, "I'm in town, I'm just coming back from Europe, I'm about to start college in the fall." And she said, "You gotta come in right now." And the only reason she was in New York was because her luggage got lost, and she had to wait for her luggage to come back.
Well, when I first met Jennifer Beals, she just got off a plane and she lost all of her luggage. I remember that. So she was in a very emotional state. I was just bowled over with the way she looked, just her face. She had a kind of a glow. She was 17, and it's like you go, God, I've got her at the right time. And she came in and she did a bit of dancing. And honestly, she wasn't the world's best dancer, so I wasn't taking her for that, you know. But she had just a terrific quality, and I kind of knew immediately that she was right for this thing.
And Adrian looked at her and said, "That's the girl." I mean, he knew right away. She had no makeup on. He worked with her for at least an hour and a half trying to get a performance out of her. And she wasn't somebody who'd actually been studying acting, but Adrian was somebody who loves to give young people an opportunity and likes fresh talent and felt he could get a good performance out of her.
Some nights I just can't wait to get out there, just so I can disappear.
But she had a kind of a vulnerability as well as looking extraordinary. And I knew, you know, that she didn't necessarily have to do the dancing. I could get somebody else to help with that.
No, it's interesting because after we did the test, every one of us had a different girl who was our favorite girl. And what Michael Eisner did, we showed the test to Michael, and Michael took all the secretaries from the floor and brought them into the screening room and said, "Who do you like?" And they all picked Jennifer, the same girl that Adrian wanted.
You're Alex.
I know.
I'm Nick Hurley.
Really?
I was living in New York doing an off-Broadway play, and I got a call about a picture that Sam Peckinpah was doing called The Osterman Weekend. So I met with Sam Peckinpah, and he said, "I'd like you to be in my movie." And then my agent gave me a script with the unlikely title of Flashdance. Scrolled across the page. I thought, what a strange title this is. What could this be about? And my agent said, "Just read it, see what you think." So I read it. And I liked it. I thought it was a very sweet story. So I went in and met with Adrian Lyne, and my agent said to the Paramount people, "Well, we've got another offer, and you guys have to make your move by 6 o'clock. Otherwise, he's going to go do Peckinpah's movie." And I was fine with that. I mean, how can you lose? Turns out, the Peckinpah movie didn't do very well, and Flashdance became iconic.
Hello, dancer.
Hi.
Want a hand?
No, thanks.
I think what's nice about Michael Nury is that he has a kind of a stillness. You know, he doesn't do too much. And he was kind of her conscience, if you like, in the movie. You know, he was kind of like a mentor. And in terms of the love scenes, he was in no way sleazy, I think. And I've always thought it was more interesting in any sort of scene of sexuality. I like the woman to be the aggressor. I think it's much more interesting to watch, to be honest. The cliche really is the man taking her in his arms and grabbing her and kissing her or whatever. But it's much more interesting, I think, coming from the other way, really. Especially in the terms of this movie, which was sort of about emancipation and about going for it and stuff like that.
Oh, Green, damn you, I can't believe it, he didn't call.
So at one stage, it was really a toss-up between Cynthia Rhodes and Jennifer Beals and another girl. And luckily, Cynthia agreed, in the end she didn't get the lead, but she agreed to work in the movie. I mean, and she was an extraordinary dancer. At the time, I think just about the best dancer of her type in the country.
Cynthia Rhodes got the part because she's a phenomenal dancer, and she was beautiful, and she could act. The rest of them all brought something fresh to the party.
I need that BLT on Rye, Richie.
Sally Johnson, who played Jeannie in the movie, again, as I remember it, hadn't done a great deal of work, but she just had a sweetness to her, you know? And unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. She died of an aneurysm, I think, a long while ago, which was just a hideous waste, because I think she would have done very well.
Alexandra, you are 18 years old. Do it now.
Okay. Okay.
You are a good girl.
I mean, I think Lilia played a kind of a surrogate mother, if you like, a little bit for her, and also a mentor. You know, she just pushed her to take this audition. Well, I just knew she was a terrific theatre actress, and it was fun working with her, really, just because she had such technique.
Hey, Small, I'll give you a Small. This place is so small you have to go outside to change your mind.
Adrian wanted characters in real life who were humorous and fun. We would interview comedians to be extras, just to spruce up the stuff in the bar. So we'd bring in these comedians, we'd do little bits for Adrian. Some of them become stars. So, I mean, it's real interesting how Adrian works. So he always tries to find somebody who's unique, fresh, and has a little sense of humor about them, or can emote some comedy, or has good comedic timing.
Hi, I'm Richard Blasek. Did you hear the one about the Polak bank robber?
When I was auditioning for the film, I was very nervous because I was going to meet the director. So at the time I was doing a lot of Tai Chi, you know, grab horse's head, and show the monkey and all that stuff. And I would do it to relax before auditions. So I went way off in a corner and I did about 20 minutes of breathing and relaxing, and I calmed myself, I got centered, and I went into the audition. And I was introduced to Adrian, and Adrian said, "Hello, I'm Adrian Lyne." I said, "Hello, I'm Kyle Hefner." And he goes, so what was all this waving of the arms you were doing? I said, "What are you talking about?" Because we were looking out the window and we could see you waving your arms about over in the corner. So he had been seeing me the whole time, and somehow I think that my Tai Chi helped me eventually get the role. And then I had one more audition where standing there right outside the office was an incredibly beautiful young girl, and she had a bag of candy, and I said hi, and she said hi. She said, "I'm Jennifer," and I said, "I'm Kyle, nice to meet you." She says, "Would you like some candy?" And I said, I'd love some. So we stood there and ate candy and talked for a little bit, and that might have been the actual final callback, just to see how well I could eat candy with Jennifer and how well we got along.
And this is my big chance, so if you screw it up for me, I'm going to put cockroaches in your hamburgers. You got it?
At the time, I think he did quite a lot of stand-up, you know, which of course he does in the movie. But I've always liked working with comedians. I worked with Stuart Pankin and on Fatal Attraction, and what's nice is that they're kind of catalysts. They make everybody laugh, and they also ad-lib really well.
Good evening, ladies.
Usually.
Look at that, $21,321, all leather, push button. Want to go for a ride?
Ugh.
I met Leaving. I actually saw him singing with his group, with Fear. And it's funny, he came in to see us and he said, "You've got to understand," he said, "I am Johnny C," the guy he was playing, you know? And as far as I know, he'd never acted before. So what I really like is kind of leaps of faith, you know? I like just going instinctively, really. I think it's a good way to go. Obviously, you come from a visual point of view, but in the end, the reason I do these things is for the actors, really. I mean, people say, "Oh, he makes it look nice," you know, and hopefully I do. But what I do like is that with the actors, you know, that's for me what is exciting, because you can have a shitty-looking movie with great actors and great performances, and, you know, the movie works. But a great-looking nothing never works. I've always thought that my job should be called selector rather than director. I've always thought that director is a kind of a misnomer, because what you're doing is a process of selection endlessly, you know, with actors, with locations, with lighting. It's a process of kind of honing it down and making, hopefully, the right decision.
The reason we shot in Pittsburgh is we wanted a real blue-collar town, and since Pittsburgh was a steel town, we felt it was a perfect place.
Pittsburgh was a dream come true for Andrew Carnegie, and it was part of the birth of the Industrial Revolution of this country. And we're using that as a background for a story about having a dream come true. And you've got a girl working in an industry that is not what it used to be, and she wants to break out of it. And there she is with her welding machine and her mask, trying to break out of steel, a world of steel.
You know, I went there, I guess, at an interesting time, you know, when there was still acres of old factories that were kind of disused, rusting, sort of paint peeling, and I love decaying stuff. I mean, I just love shooting in areas like that, you know, like when he takes it to this kind of shunting yard, you know, where there's railway lines and stuff like that, rather than a park, you know, rather than a movie theater. And I think that's fun to do that, you know, because suddenly it becomes fresher.
Hey, watch it now, guys.
It's funny, you were talking about visuals. We were working in a kind of a tunnel where she was welding. I said I want the walls to be wet looking. I wanted them to have a kind of a sheen. So all along this tunnel, they put up a kind of a pipe so they could turn it on and off and make it look wet. But then when I saw the pipe working, I realized that they shouldn't turn the water off, that it looked great with the water permanently dripping, kind of streaming. But it's nice when you accidentally see something that works that you hadn't expected to work. We spent 2 weeks in Pittsburgh, I think, for the exteriors, and for the actual construction site. That was all shot in Pittsburgh, but the rest was shot here in LA.
Hi, Grant.
The Loft was shot downtown LA. Then it was a much funkier place. There was still lots of disused warehouses and stuff like that. And we built Morby's, the bar, in a kind of a factory space, as I remember. And so it was fun to have this big space for me to film in, because there were all sorts of lighting options where you could get a totally different texture, a totally different lighting feeling.
You know, there was smoke everywhere. There was always more smoke. Oh, there's more smoke. We need more smoke. Because he wanted this smoky atmosphere throughout the film.
I'd always worked with smoke for a long while prior to that, which means, but you have it in the atmosphere and it changes the color. You know, it makes things look more pastel-y, less contrasty. And when you're using smoke, obviously, there would be 2 or 3 takes that would be too smoky, where you couldn't see anybody.
When Adrian first shot the Loft sequence with her coming home for the very first time, it was just full of smoke. I mean, he's a big smoke guy, commercials, you know. Well, it looked like the place was on fire. It just was like so smoky.
And so there was a lot of panic at the studio about me using smoke. So an edict came out, no more smoke. But I couldn't just stop, you know, because I'd done half of the movie with smoke, and you can't just change the look of it. So after that, somebody was always on the door to tell me when to hide the smoke can, you know.
I certainly knew that Michael Kaplan, the fantastic costume designer, was creating a new fashion, because every place I went, whether it was in Texas or at Disneyland or in Venice, I saw torn t-shirts and torn sweatshirts and leg warmers galore. And it's when I first learned the power of this medium.
I was very excited by the look that we were putting together for Jennifer. Not just the cut-off sweatshirt, but just everything. The big heavy man's top coat that she was wearing, the fact that she was wearing maybe 3 scarves, 3 mufflers at the same time. She'd wear leggings or leotards with a big sweatshirt or t-shirt. Dancers wore leg warmers. I mean, that's what dancers wore. I think the way Jennifer wore them in the film was just such a sexy look. You know, covering up the bottom of the leg and exposing the top of the leg. And I think just doing things in a slightly different way than people were used to seeing them made a different kind of statement.
I had never seen a woman take her bra off without removing her blouse or her shirt. And I think I heard that that was something that Jenny did in her meeting with Adrian. And it's great, we're going to put it in the movie.
I just saw her do it and I said, shit, I've got to use that, that's amazing. And what was nice is it becomes another layer in the scene. So the fact she was taking her bra off while she was talking, it just made it memorable, I think.
If you close your eyes You can see the music.
Adrian, against the studio's wishes, kept putting her in these big, bulky clothes. She was wearing pea-jacket coats and army things because he wanted it to be real. He didn't want the girl to walk around in real sexy clothing because that's not who she was. She was a blue-collar kid. The sexiness came out of when she performed.
Prior to that, when I was doing commercials, I always liked women wearing kind of oversized stuff, T-shirts, things like that. Actually, I guess girls in men's clothing always looks good, you know what I'm saying, hanging off them. And so that sort of look I had done before, but I wasn't prepared for the effect that it had on people.
People ask me how this sweatshirt that became so famous arose. It wasn't anything I invented. I think the fact that she wears that costume on the poster and the movie became such a big hit, that look became validated, and many girls who identified with it wanted to look that way, so they started wearing it. But a few years before, when I was in art school in Philadelphia, I used to go to the Pennsylvania Ballet Company and sit and watch their rehearsals and do sketches. And even back then, I noticed that the dancers would wear sweat clothes to keep their muscles warm, but for maneuverability, they would cut them in various ways. They'd cut the sleeves off, they'd cut the neckbands off. And so the fact that Jennifer was a construction worker, sweat clothes seemed appropriate for her character. The fact that she was a dancer, cut-up clothes also seemed appropriate.
I remember I was in New York, the movie had already come out, and somebody said, everybody is wearing those T-shirts hanging off their shoulder like that, those kind of frayed edge things. And I hadn't noticed, and I went out into the street and I walked up and down 7th Avenue or something like that. And I would say every third girl was wearing that stuff. And that was a fabulous feeling. It's lovely when you realize that your movie has had that sort of effect, it has really got through to people.
It turns you on.
Well, I don't know if you remember the dinner scene with her boss and eating the lobster and sucking on the lobster with the oil dripping down her chin, and then she puts her foot in the guy's crotch, and that's all Adrian's fantasy.
She was actually wearing a whole tuxedo in that scene, and Adrian said that he wanted to find a way for her to punctuate the scene after they have the run-in with his ex-wife.
Nikki's told me all about you.
Hi.
You're not really a welder, are you?
So rather than have her just wearing a tuxedo, which I thought would be really cool and different, I thought, what if there was like another step to it? And it would give Adrian what he was looking for, a way of her having the last statement in the scene.
I fucked his brains out.
So Adrian brought to the table very specific style. He's a stylist. I think that is in large part what the success of the movie is owed to.
When I was making the movie, I kept referring to it as a musical. And everybody said, "Oh, Jerry, you're crazy, it's not a musical." Well, it was a musical. It was the first contemporary musical, something that changed, I guess, cinema for the future.
In '83, when I started to do the music for Flashdance, I had already done some movies. One was Midnight Express, my first movie. I did American Gigolo with Richard Gere. I did a movie with Adrian Lyne called Foxes. And I did some acts, like I think I was still working with Donna Summer and some other pop arts.
Giorgio Moroder is somebody I met because I loved his music. And I met Giorgio, he did some songs for us for Gigolo. And then I called him when we got the script in. And I said, "We got the script, I'm gonna send it to you. It has all these songs that we need to have done." And about, I'd say, maybe 6 to 8 weeks before we started filming, he sent this little demo in. and it was What a Feeling.
Well, I started to compose on the piano, and I had a little melody of the beginning which I used to play just like that, and I thought maybe this piece fits in, so da-da-dum, da-da-dum. And I presented the song to Irene Cara and Keith Forsey, who used to work with me as a musician, and they came up with the idea, What a Feeling. We did a little demo with Irene, and they loved it. They loved it.
When you first heard it, you said, it's a hit. It's one of those things you just heard and you just couldn't get out of your head. And it just got us all so excited, and we kept playing it over, and I never got tired of it. To this day, I'm not tired of that song.
Frightened by a dream, you're not the only one.
There's another song of mine called Lady, 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 and it reflects a little bit the idea this girl now is a lady, and it's a very romantic song. And Joe Esposito sang it, and it became a nice little hit. With the ideas of Adrian Lyne how to cut the movie came the idea of Jerry and Don how to put the right song in the right place. And Phil Ramone, of course, was extremely helpful. In fact, he picked quite a lot of the songs.
I worked very closely with Phil Ramone, who was the music supervisor, because we needed lots of music, obviously, for all of the dance numbers, etc. And I remember very well with Maniac, which became a huge hit. And one of their tunes that I'd heard had a kind of a chime in it, a kind of bing bong, like that. And I said, let's use that. Let's use that as a kind of a motif, as a kind of a driving thing for a dance, you know?
Here's a song that Michael Sembello had written. She's a steel town girl on a Saturday night, and you remember that. And then she's a maniac. That's about all he had written. At the end of it, Adrian Lyne, the director, had gotten used to it, and they said, okay, this is going to stay in the picture. So he and I scrambled and finished what was a little demo made in a cottage-type studio. The creative side of this was to do something bizarre to get your attention. So He's a Dreamer is like totally off the wall.
He's a dream.
And yet it's a great song. So if you stop to think about it and you hear it alone, it has a life. But it has double the life in this movie.
I'm going on a manhunt.
We did a song called Manhunt. 2 college kids had sent me this song. I didn't know the demo singer. I just used it because I knew when this girl was going to climb up the wall and do a somersault with a baseball mask and then go into this dance, we needed something ridiculous. Turns out that the girl turned out to be my wife. I had no idea she could sing like that. This guy took her in the studio. I had nothing to do with it. And when I heard it, I said, I'll buy that. That's the kind of snarky rock and roll voice. So Manhunt serves a great purpose.
Part of what obviously made Flashdance the hit that it became was using music as a driving force to the movie, as another character in the movie.
Well, actually, I love What a Feeling, really. I mean, I live in France, you know, and often I go into a bar or a restaurant or something like that, and I hear it being played, and that's a terrific feeling, you know, like 25 years later, they're still playing the theme from my movie, you know, and I like that a lot.
We went to New York and we went to these different kind of dance classes. And we found this woman who was an extraordinary dancer and had this real exciting, like Broadway dance class. And she came in and she choreographed this dance with Jennifer. We all looked at it, and it was interesting, but it was too artistic. Didn't have the visceral, sexy stuff that we ended up getting in Flashdance. And so we were all kind of depressed, didn't know what to do. John Peters, his ex-wife, was dating a choreographer. And John said, you gotta meet Jeffrey. He'll come in, he'll help you. And so of course we did, we brought Jeffrey in. And Jeffrey has this energy, and this enthusiasm. And he kind of captured what we wanted.
I started off by hiring somebody else, but we didn't sort of get on. I know, it just didn't work, really, the chemistry. And so Jeffrey had never been a choreographer, but he was a dancer. So working with him was terrific because he had absolutely no kind of ego.
The thing I first remembered that when I first met him was Adrian's real depth of sensitivity he had. He didn't come on with a lot of bravado, but he was very, very smart and sensitive about the way he wanted to approach things. And so that I kind of fell in under his wing in a sense. He made it a very, very warm and creative space to try things.
But when he started working with Jennifer, he says, we gotta get a double. We gotta get somebody who's a professional dancer to do this. She's not a trained dancer. I can make it work perfect and seamless with Jennifer as long as I get a double. And then he auditioned all these young ladies and found one that he thought was fantastic, and she ended up doing a lot of the dance work in the movie.
Yes, her name was Marine Jahan, and she happened to be French. And it's curious, really, how the press found out that she had done most of Jennifer's dancing, and they felt that it was kind of a cheat or something, I guess, you know, and there was a huge amount of press about it, which I think worked for the film, funny enough. You know, I think people were kind of fascinated by the fact that it was a kind of a composite, if you like.
He doesn't mean a thing to me.
Charles Rosen, who was our production designer, and Adrian would create different sets and different colors for each dance to make each one exciting and different. And Adrian always pushed his creative people to always come back with something fresh and new.
We worked really hard on the dances. I mean, for example, there was one dance that I knew I wanted it to be wet. I knew I wanted the dance to have water, because obviously water looks good on skin and it's kind of erotic and it flies around, you know what I'm saying, when it's backlit. And I'd never seen a wet dance, if you like. And I just remember the complete sort of skepticism on everybody's faces, you know, that there's no way that would work.
We had designed the sequence for the opening number with the water shot. And first day, the stuff was shot from the front, looking towards a backlit, milked plexiglass. And consequently, when the water fell, it didn't have this dynamic impact as we thought it was going to.
And Adrian, I remember the trouble we had with the light. The cord was twisted, and we couldn't get it right. It took forever, and we were falling behind, and the studio was yelling and hollering that we were not on schedule.
We went back to shoot the next day to shoot out the sequence, and I remember standing next to him as we were watching a rehearsal, and we were upstage watching the dancer from behind. And there was a Super Trooper spotlight out in front that was illuminating her, and Adrian saw her silhouette against that backlight and went, that's it! You know, that's what we got to do for the water shots.
David LaChapelle, actually, I think, directed a video with Jennifer Lopez, which literally reprised, as I remember it, that particular sequence. I mean, almost shot by shot. That's, you know, very flattering.
It varied. There was, for example, the song Maniac, you know, where she's doing this rehearsal sequence in her loft. And we didn't know quite what it was going to be, so we just took Michael's cassette tape of it and went to the set and evolved it in the moment as we were working through it. Because it was a more of a montage, not a linear piece, we had the freedom to kind of experiment and grab bits as we were going. So that even the shooting of it was very spontaneous and kind of evolved on the floor. Whereas something like the final number, that was much more strategic. We knew that we had to hit certain emotional beats, so it would depend on what the sequence was.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Cynthia Rhodes was precast prior to me coming on, but she again was just a phenomenal facility to work with. Again, her sensibility and mine kind of matched. She was a very well-trained gymnast as well as a really good dancer, you know, so it opened up for me a whole nother kind of approach to the choreography by doing the things like running up the wall and doing backflips and, you know, all this kind of really visceral athletic work. So her capabilities really challenged me to try and evolve something that would, one, fit the intention of the scene, but also give her something that she could sink her teeth into.
Each one of the dancers had their own theme for their dance. The one that blew me away, and I think was intended to blow the audience away, was the kabuki one, with all the psychedelic black and white tiles. That was impressive.
I remember seeing the trailer for the film, and it looked like this sweet kind of fairy tale, you know, and then they went out to the street dance sequence, and people in the audience just spontaneously erupted in applause for a trailer. So there was that kind of pop cultural thrill of seeing something that had been brewing underground kind of break through to the mainstream.
We were in New York doing our casting and scouting locations and looking for things to do. We went to this roller rink. It was a Monday night, and the place was empty. And except in one corner, there were these kids who came in from Brooklyn and the Bronx, and every Monday they do their dances, and that's where breakdancing started. And Adrian and I looked at this and said, we gotta use this in the movie. We gotta figure out a place to put it.
They were called the Rocksteady Crew, and at that stage they were kind of rival gangs in the Bronx that invented this sort of dancing. And I guess they kind of did it instead of fighting each other, you know what I'm saying?
He was just grabbing that stuff and doing it as he was going. It was like watching a great musician improvise.
It's nice when you sort of do research about Pittsburgh, and I read an article about a cop who had just retired, and he did this sort of routine, a kind of a mime routine, pretending to shoot people and waving them on with his feet in the traffic. And so we got him in, and even though he had retired, you know, he agreed to direct traffic for us. And then it became a kind of a dance sequence, a kind of a mini dance sequence in the middle of the movie, which I think sort of worked well for the character because she drew on that, this woman. That's the stuff that she sort of used in her dances. The last scene in the movie is the audition that Jennifer Beals has to get into the dance theater. So I try to make it embody stuff that we'd seen in the rest of the movie. There's a moment in it that kind of refers back to Sonny Johnson's scene at the ice skating where she falls and she should have got up and started again, you know, and so you have that in the back of your mind.
But a slow, glowing dream.
Brilliant. As an actor, I'll tell you that I related to that from the point of view of going in for an audition and flubbing a line, screwing up. I'd like to start over again because it's like, oh God, what's going to happen, you know? We're going to start over again. And then from that moment on, you're holding your breath through the whole performance, through that whole audition, to see, is she going to screw up again?
So the first time we shot it, it kind of worked. It was pretty exciting. But I remember Michael Eisner at the studio said, you know, it'd be really good if we could goose this, do another day's shooting, and just add to it, make it a little bit more climactic. And in the end, we employed a girl gymnast. We employed a break dancer who put a wig on and wore tights. And he really objected to putting this stuff on because he was a pretty macho guy, you know, from the Bronx or whatever.
I remember we geared him up in his leotard and his white tights and a wig. And I said to him, do you mind cutting your mustache? He's like, that's it. I won't cut the mustache. So we had to do his shot with him hiding his face in particular so as not to, you know, see the character with a mustache.
So in that last sequence, there are literally 4 people. There's Jennifer's face, there's Marion Johans dancing, plus the break dancer, plus the gymnast flying through the air.
And then the release, when she bursts out of the building, brand new day, brand new life, and there's her guy with a dozen roses and her dog. What woman could ask for more?
Eventually the movie got made, but right to the end, nobody really had any confidence in the movie at all. So they obviously didn't think it was going to do any business. And I must say, I couldn't get anybody on the phone. I mean, I would try and ring and sort of find people 2 weeks before the release of the film, and it was horrendous.
Living on the edge, sliding down hills to where the good girls don't, but the bad girls will, bad girls will.
And, you know, you go through periods on a movie where you say, oh, we're making the worst movie ever. We look at sequences that were so long and they got very boring, or the dailies got boring. But when you started to put together, and we had Bud Smith, who was one of the greatest editors ever, because we had a very short post, and so he really didn't have much time to cut the movie, and they were working around the clock.
It was one of those killer schedules. I mean, by having 2 editors, myself and Walt Mulconnery, we had 3 assistants and 2 apprentices too, because we were working around the clock. We worked, I think it was 72 days and nights without stopping.
Adrian shoots an enormous amount of film. He uses a number of cameras because he had those big dance sequences. So he'd have 2, 3, 4 cameras on those dance sequences. So they'd go through all those film, sync it up, look at everything, and try to get a sequence cut together. And then Adrian would come in the room and throw it all out and start all over again.
But it had to be tight. You know, we couldn't let this film go on and on and on lengthwise. So it finally became Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson with Adrian, all of them into the editing room and deciding what we had to take out.
And what we wanted to do is take the audience, or take the character, down as far as you could take her. She lost her aunt, the one who was her advisor through the picture. And we just kept diving her down further and further and further. So when she started to come up, it was the emotional outburst at the end was so much stronger. And that's what I think really pushed us over the top. And a lot of scenes came out that were interfering with her own personal arc.
I remember sitting in the preview theater with my assistant, with Casey Silver. We both thought this was a disaster. You know, I said, is there any way I can get out of the theater without being seen? Because all of the executives were behind. And at about exactly that moment, the audience started laughing at something, and then at something else, and I sort of realized that they liked it.
Well, miracles do happen, I guess.
And the results of this preview were terrific. I mean, the numbers were very good. And I remember there was a lot of people at the studio who thought that we'd fiddled the results. They thought that the people in the theater were our friends who were writing nice stuff about it. So that nobody knew that it would do any business.
I think the picture was universally panned. One journalist critic called it a toxic waste dump. And a number of years later, he re-reviewed the picture and said, I missed it. I really didn't get it. But the kids got it, and the public got it.
I framed 2 reviews side by side. One review said, don't look for advertising on this film, just look for strategic signs of pollution. That was one review. The other one, next to it, was that it was the state of the art of filmmaking at that time. So I put them both up, because they're both nonsense.
Opening weekend, and Don and I go to Westwood in Los Angeles. And there was one big theater, I think it was the Village where it opened in. And right across the street was a record store. The kids would walk out of the theater, go to the record store, buy the album, which was gone in an hour. The Polygram only shipped 60,000, so they really had no faith in the record. It took them 2 or 3 weeks to replenish the stock, and went from the record store back into the theater. So it was like a loop. They'd see the movie 2, 3 times.
It's interesting, it did $4 million for the weekend, I remember this. And that was sort of about the minimum you needed for a hit, right? And it just sat from April to September and did exactly the same amount. It didn't go, I think it went up a little bit maybe, but it pretty much stayed at the same level. It didn't fall off. You know, movies always fall off. And this thing just sat there. It's funny.
You know, I'd still be living in a small apartment in Hollywood if it was based on the reviews of our movies, and especially Flashdance. But it's the public that speak. They got to sit there and pay their hard-earned money to be entertained by us. And if we get it right, like we did in Flashdance, they'll come back over and over again.
It was that weird thing where you walk in anonymous, and you walk out and everyone's staring at you. It was odd. It was wonderful.
Well, it just shows that sometimes they work great and sometimes they don't work great. This is one that just happened to work really brilliantly by Adrian's direction and believing in the film from Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, and then hiring me to kind of shepherd the film on to the finish. And so therefore you feel very complete when you finally get nominated and you win a British Academy Award. The only thing I wish I'd have gotten was the Academy Award. Then my whole career would have been totally complete.
We certainly were a little surprised how big the movie became and how much the music worked and how well it worked. Plus, we went to #1 with the album, and you know, the first awards started to come in, and finally, I thought maybe after winning the Golden Globes, maybe we have a chance for the Oscar, and it won.
I think all of the songs had a place because it also won a Grammy for a really good album as a soundtrack album. In those days, they didn't exactly win that easily.
Somebody rang me up from New York and said that he said, you know, they're dancing in the aisles, he said, in Times Square. He said, you have to come, he said. They get up in the middle of the movie and they dance around in the aisles, and they were, you know.
It was the beginning of a whole world for women going to the movies, and for everyone who was disempowered from believing that they had a chance to chase their dreams. And it had so much power in what it was trying to express that it just was like a nuclear missile.
Unhappily, a number of people who I worked with on this movie, like Don Simpson, who I miss enormously, Dawn Steele also, who I miss enormously, played like a huge part in this film. Sonny Johnson now isn't with us anymore, you know, who played Jeannie. So that's sad, and I miss them like crazy, actually, I really do.
Dawn got sick, and she was eventually diagnosed with brain cancer. And when I think about Flashdance, I can't think about it without thinking about Dawn.
The young girls who were touched by this movie are now moms, and so I will run into these moms from time to time, and this movie has touched people in such a wonderful, special way. I'm very proud to have been part of it.
But you understand, you give up your dream, you die.
And it's corny, but it's kind of true, you know, and I think that's why people took to the movie. In fact, people wrote to me afterwards and said that it had an effect on their life, and, you know, they were doing a job that they loathed, and it made them go out and try and do the job that they wanted to do.
Those images on that screen, the girl with those big dark brown eyes, and those wonderful dances, and the sexiness of the movie, is something you want to relive, and the music, of course, you know, stays with you.